It is the News Blitz with Randy Wang on Talk Radio 790 KABC. We're here every single day from 5 to 6 talking about the local issues that matter to you most and taking your phone calls at 800-222-KABC, 1-800-222-5222, your emails at randykabc@gmail.com, and search for the KABC News Blitz wherever you get your podcasts. It doesn't matter what the crisis is in a place like Los Angeles City or Los Angeles County. To certain groups, the answer and the solution to that crisis is the same thing over and over and over again. In March of 2020, which was over 5 years ago now, the city of Los Angeles declared a state of emergency over COVID. And one of the things that was done in the city of Los Angeles, as well as the county of Los Angeles and the state of California, when the lockdowns happened and Barbara Ferrer took control and decided that people couldn't dine outdoors and people couldn't go to the beach and people couldn't go golfing, and only essential workers could go to work, there was fear that a whole lot of people were going to be out of their jobs or furloughed. And that means that they're not going to be able to pay their rent, which means then they're going to be out on the street, and we just can't have that. So the local electeds in the city of LA and the county of LA, as well as the state of California, passed an eviction moratorium. That eviction moratorium meant that it didn't matter if you couldn't pay your rent, you couldn't get kicked out of your place until the emergency was over, whenever that was going to be. Turns out that eviction moratorium in the city of Los Angeles lasted until January 31st, 2023. That eviction moratorium lasted nearly 3 years. And if you remember, while a lot of people were out of work and shut down in the first year of COVID, by 2022, things had pretty much gotten back to normal, at least by traffic standards. I should know, I drive the 405. And as awful as COVID was, it was really nice being an essential worker, and the 405 was wide open every day. But we had an eviction moratorium in the city of Los Angeles for almost 3 years, which is also interesting because you realize nobody was kicked out of their apartment. You could not be evicted from 2020 through 2023. And the homeless numbers kept going up, almost like that has nothing to do with it, which is what they'll tell you. We need these eviction moratoriums or more people are going to end up on the street. More people are going to become homeless. Well, there were quite a few problems with those eviction moratoriums as they were painted with broad brushes and didn't require a whole lot of proof of hardship. So while these are isolated incidents, they're still worth pointing out. You had landlords that could not legally kick out people who had the money to pay their rent, were not paying their rent. And if I remember correctly, there was a case in, I think it was San Jose, where somebody was subleasing the apartment they were refusing to pay rent on to somebody, and they were collecting the rent. So that one lasted a really, really, really long time. But when it ended, almost immediately, the people who made sure to put the pressure on to get an action like that wanted to find a reason to bring it back any way possible. You go back to January of this year, and we dealt with the horrific fires that destroyed parts of Malibu, the Palisades, Altadena, parts of Pasadena. And a lot of people overnight literally lost their homes. But most of those people had places they could go, whether it was shelters, whether it was hotels, whether it was staying with friends and family. People found ways around that. But at the LA City Council, there was a concern that all of the people who make their living in a place like the Palisades, they were thinking of nannies and maids and gardeners who travel to a place like the Palisades for work. They've lost their main source of income. And you would think, well, wouldn't the obvious thing to be to figure out who those people are and then connect them with other people that could hire them, which is something that Tracy Park's office was actively doing. But the DSA LA portion of the LA City Council said, you know what we need right now in the wake of this emergency? An eviction moratorium, because these people aren't going to be able to pay their rent. So we should make sure that even though they can't pay their rent, they cannot get kicked out of their apartment. And here we are in June of 2025. There is yet another crisis facing Los Angeles, and the power brokers in the unions that control several members of the LA City Council, whenever the SEIU wants something, eventually it's something that Hugo Soto Martinez wants as well.
Yeah, clap that up.
They have a new solution for what they consider is a big problem. Immigration raids are happening all throughout Los Angeles. The undocumented illegal immigrant community is afraid to leave their house. They're afraid to go to work. You've seen places like the Santa Fe Springs swap meet, which I can't believe swap meets are still a thing in 2025, but they're empty now because I guess all the people who were selling their wares there weren't in the country legally. Well, since these people cannot work, they obviously cannot pay their rent. And so the power brokers that be, the unions rallied yesterday to demand that the LA City Council once again pass an eviction moratorium, making sure anybody who's in the country illegally doesn't have to pay their rent and doesn't have to get kicked out if they can't pay their rent. What is this about? What happened? Let's find out. Here's a report from KTLA.
Good evening. I'm Micah Allman. After weeks of immigration enforcement operations in Southern California, the Los Angeles Tennants Union is joining other labor and community leaders demanding ICE agents leave Los Angeles.
Can you call it a union if you don't pay dues? Sure, it's the Tennants Union, just like there is the homeless union.
The groups are calling for an eviction moratorium because of the immigration enforcement. KTLA's Rachel Menatop with details from downtown L.A.
Doesn't matter what the problem is. Eviction moratorium is the answer. And let's have it last way longer than the actual crisis is. And we'll be real iffy on the details if anyone actually has to pay back what they owe.
Hi, good evening.
It has got to be a real tough living to want to be a landlord in the city and county of Los Angeles. Good luck to you.
Hi, good evening. One of the tenants here today says people are scared to go to work, to go to school, to buy groceries, and it's nearly impossible to pay rent when family members are either detained or are in hiding.
What do we want? When do we?
Couldn't hear you because of the horn honking.
What do we want? When do we want it?
The Los Angeles Tennants Union and members of SEIU 721 marching through the streets of downtown LA.
You know what's wild is how many members of the SEIU are free to show up at City Council, show up at the LA County Board of Supervisors, and free to protest constantly all the time. I thought these people are supposed to be working for a living.
Downtown LA. Stopping by the federal building where National Guardsmen and Marines have been stationed amidst wide-scale immigration enforcement. For its part, ICE says its men and women are putting their lives on the line every day to arrest violent criminals and defend the lives of American citizens.
Of course, they can't go into the jails because of our sanctuary policies, but that's another story for another day.
Steve Gibson says the ongoing, oftentimes surprise activity is actually negatively impacting LA's workforce.
And if immigrants are afraid to go to work, they're afraid to go out in public, they're afraid to go to the stores, afraid to take their kids to school, then that's strangling the economy.
Fight, fight, fight!
By the way, I don't know how widespread this is, just based on anecdotal evidence. It's not like the freeways are all of a sudden magically lighter. Feel like there are as many people crowded on the 405 today as there were a week ago and the week before that and the week before that.
Fight, fight, fight! Housing is a human right.
The LA
Oh, boy. You gotta love it when they come up with a rhyme.
Fight, fight, fight. Housing is a human right.
What does that mean, though? I mean, sure, it's a great slogan, but if housing is a human right, or if you're Bernie Sanders, housing is a human right, does that mean that you should be able to live somewhere rent-free no matter what? There should be some level of public housing that if you can't afford to pay rent, you go to the public housing and the public pays for it? Because the public hasn't really invested in those kinds of projects in about 50 years.
Fight, fight, fight. Housing is a human right.
The LA Tennants Union now urging City Council pass emergency protections, including an eviction moratorium within the next week.
And is that going to be targeted towards people that can prove they're specifically affected by this, or is this going to be completely widespread? You remember when they tried to pass the eviction moratorium for the fires, they said, well, people just need to self-attest that they were a victim of the fires, either directly or indirectly, and then they won't have to pay their rent for a year. Yeah, because I'm sure there's nobody that would ever think to take advantage of that program.
I am Kenia Alcocer. I am undocumented, and I refuse to go back to the shadows.
This because many of Los Angeles' working class community will not be able to pay rent come July 1st. Last week, 7 city councilors joined legal forces to protect people from being racially profiled or unlawfully detained, a proposal that still has to make its rounds through City Hall.
This terrorizing of our communities have closed down businesses, have taken away street vendors, have separated families. And
have they made it to MacArthur Park yet? There's a lot of work that needs to be done specifically at MacArthur Park.
And then people cannot pay their rent. They have barely the minimum to survive.
What do I want?
Felipe Cáceres is a coordinator with SEIU.
Right now, we are in an emergency and a crisis that has been worse than COVID in our city.
That might be an overstatement. I mean, COVID, the entire state was locked down. We stopped teaching the kids at school because Cecily Meyer Cruz said we had to get rid of the LAUSD police department. But sure, according to the SEIU, this is the worst crisis we've ever seen.
We are in an emergency and a crisis that has been worse than COVID in our city. There are people being kidnapped and put in this detention facility, and these are the primary breadwinners of their household.
By the way, that's the new hot term, is to use the term kidnapping for what's going on, to the point where someone literally called the LAPD saying they were being kidnapped when they were part of being detained by Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and that led the LAPD to have to respond, and then the activist said, see, LAPD's here at a nice rate. How dare they?
And these are the primary breadwinners of their household.
And a representative from the city council says they did not discuss the possibility of an eviction moratorium at today's meeting, and there's no official written legislation at this point. In downtown LA, I'm Rachel Menitoff, KTLA 5 News. Back to you.
Something tells me that doesn't mean that something isn't being crafted right now with an impassioned plea from Ulysses Hernandez.
Quite frankly,
Hugo Soto Martinez.
Yeah, clap that up.
Nithya Raman or Isabel Urado. But look, they're saying that we're in another crisis. People are afraid to go outside. They're afraid to go to work. They're afraid to get groceries. So if they're afraid to go to work, then they obviously can't pay their rent. And if they can't pay their rent, they'll be evicted. So I'll ask you, since this is what the SEIU and the LA Tennants Union say we need to solve this crisis, give me a call right now and weigh in on this. 800-222-KABC. 1-800-222-5222. The SEIU and the LA Tennants Union want the city council to pass an eviction moratorium in response to Immigration and Customs Enforcement raids in Los Angeles. Do you think we need an eviction moratorium to deal with this crisis? 800-222-KABC. 1-800-222-5222. Are you on board with another eviction moratorium in the wake of what's happened this month? Because that's what the SEIU wants, that's what the LA Tennants Union wants, and that's most likely what Hugo Soto Martinez wants.
Yeah, clap that up.
Are you down for an eviction moratorium for those affected by the ICE raids? 800-222-KABC. 1-800-222-5222. Get on the line right now. Tell me how you feel about this, because this is being proposed. This is something that the unions want, and the unions usually get what they want in the city of Los Angeles. 800-222-KABC. 1-800-222-5222. The Tennants Union in Los Angeles and the SEIU are pushing for an eviction moratorium in response to the ICE raids because they say immigrants are afraid to go to work. Do we need an eviction moratorium in Los Angeles? 800-222-KABC, 1-800-222-5222. It's the News Blitz with Randy Wang on Talk Radio 790 KABC. It's the News Blitz with Randy Wang on KABC. We're taking your phone calls at 800-222-KABC, 1-800-222-5222. Yesterday, members of the LA Tennants Union and the SEIU marched on LA City Hall because they want the LA City Council to pass an eviction moratorium in response to the ICE raids. They say the immigrants are afraid to leave their home, which means they can't work, which means they can't pay their rent. So I'll ask you, do you think it's time for an eviction moratorium in the city of Los Angeles? Let's go to Ray in LA. Ray, hello.
Hey, how you doing? My name is Ray. I'm a property manager, and we manage many properties for mom and pops. Most of the properties are not owned by big corporations, and we've gone through the COVID moratorium, and we're going through right now the wildfire moratorium. Now they're talking about a moratorium for ICE or whatever, for documentation. There's one thing that needs to be added. I mean, everybody has compassion for people that need it, but one thing that needs to be added to these programs, which has been left out on purpose, is they need to be required to provide proof of loss of income. Right now, they don't require that. There's no documentation required. They recommend it, but it's not required. All they got to do is simply say, "Yeah, man, I've been affected," and that's it. We're in right now over this wildfire one. We're trying to go through mediation with one tenant on that, and it's going nowhere because they're not required to do anything. So they make these hollow promises, and then they don't ever follow through because they're not required to. It's kind of a scam. They need to write, if they're going to do these kind of moratoriums, they need to write them so they make sense and that they have some credibility.
It seems that they're written with the most loopholes possible where, like you said, you can just say, I'm a victim of so-and-so crisis, and you're fully protected, whether it's legitimate or not. And nobody who's writing these moratoriums even thinks about the property managers or the owners.
Well, I'm sure they do. They don't care. They're more concerned about the tenant, and we're concerned about the tenants too. It's not a lack of compassion, because we don't evict people unless it's under horrible situations. We'll work with anybody, but when the government says you don't have to pay rent and you don't have to prove that you can't pay rent, what are you going to do? I mean, it leaves it wide open for corruption. If somebody legitimately can say, hey, look, in December, I made this much money. Here's my bank statements. And now in June, I'm making this much money. Here's my bank statements, and I want to pay. I want to get a job. I want to work out a payment plan. We'll work with them. But we're not given that opportunity. It's all basically a one-sided scam, and it's coming down all against mom and pop property owners, any kind of property owner, and that's going to have a ripple effect. The things like, believe it or not, the rent controls has the opposite effect of what it's intended to. it causes rents to constantly go up and go up and go up because they can't find, an owner, if they can only raise their rent 3% or 4%, they're going to do it every year no matter what, So,
and then on top of all that, these kinds of things that the city of LA and the county of LA has done has caused a lot of mom and pops to just say, screw it, we're not doing this anymore. And so they sell their property to one of the big companies who run everything by artificial intelligence and start really jacking up the rent.
Or what's happening in our case, especially in condominiums, which are a very desirable place to rent. You would get really good value for your money renting a condominium. But the owners are going, screw it. I'll just sell my condo and, cash out and sell it to somebody who wants to live there. And it comes off the market. So there's less rental inventory out there.
Totally. Well, thanks so much for the call and your perspective, Ray. Appreciate it. The phones are blowing up on this one. So if you want to get on the line, we got room for you right now. 800-222-KABC, 1-800-222-5222. The latest crisis that the power players in Los Angeles say we need an eviction moratorium for is the ICE raids. Is it time for another eviction moratorium in the city of Los Angeles? 800-222-KABC. It's the News Blitz with Randy Wang. If you're on hold, stay on hold. This is Talk Radio 790 KABC. The phones are locked and loaded. Here we go. It's the News Blitz with Randy Wang on Talk Radio 790 KABC. We're here every single day from 5 to 6 talking about the local issues that matter to you most, taking your phone calls at 800-222-KABC, your emails at randykabc@gmail.com, and search for the KABC News Blitz wherever you get your podcasts. Let's get right back to the phones. The SEIU and the LA Tennants Union say in response to the ICE raids, we need an eviction moratorium. Let's go to Luke in Arcadia. Luke, hello.
Yeah, what I think is going to be happening is because my grandparents used to have rental property and it was just mom and pop stuff. But, you're chasing away people that could afford to pay the rent. I think it's going to have a direct negative effect on a larger scale because if you're supporting, these people that they say they need rental assistance. I mean, and then again, just like the gentleman spoke earlier, it's open up to all kinds of fraud. I retired from the fire department, and I worked every major disaster since '84 here, and it's just rampant. But they never did this before. I've been through plenty of disasters, and everybody recovered just fine, and people that had to move on. But if you're purposely trying to keep people that live here that can't afford it, you're just screwing the whole thing up. And it's not fair to the people that own the property.
No, it's not fair to that at all. And then we've seen how these things can get abused. The fact that the COVID one lasted for 3 years and landlords still weren't made whole from that shows you why so many decide to sell to bigger companies and just get out of the market, which ultimately raised the price of rent for everybody.
Yeah, and then those corporations, they've got plenty of lawyers to take you to court to kick you out. They don't care.
Yeah. No, I think you make a really strong point, Luke. Thanks so much for the call. Appreciate it. Let's go to Derek in L.A. Derek, hello.
Hey, how are you? Randy, great show, except for that one guy that goes all the time. So before the COVID hit, everything was going well. I inherited $250,000, and then COVID hit, and then I was locked up for 2 years in Los Angeles during COVID. And now, 6 months into President Trump's presidency, he's doing a great job. I voted for him. I voted for whatever's going on. But Mayor Bass and the governor, they need to get off their asses. Karen needs to get off her ass and start getting the city back to where it was. It needs to get the streets cleaned up, and you need to figure out how you can get the people that are here illegally, and if they're working hard, they're getting up in the morning, I understand. Now, you get up, you go to work, you want to support your family in America. America's free, but there's a process you got to go through. And all this giving them free rent, helping them with their rent, Karen has to step in, Newsom has to step up and help these people out that are getting deported, that want to go to work. In Los Angeles, you got to have a pathway, and you got to have a certain tenacity and a backbone to stand up and say, hey, there's illegals and there's illegals, and the illegals that are here that are criminals, okay, we'll get them out. But the illegals that are here and they're getting up and going to work and just trying to make a living in America, in Los Angeles, get it together. It's Los Angeles. Like the mayor said, it's 500 square miles. Most of them are illegals, and they're getting up, they're going to work, they're contributing to the economy. But all this giving them free rent, everything like that. They need help, yes. But Karen and Gavin, wake up and step in.
Wow, I really appreciate the passion, Derek. Thanks so much for the call. It's so interesting because the local electeds in California have taken such extreme position, which is the sanctuary policies where we don't even let immigration enforcement into the jails, into the prisons, except for the most dire of circumstances, that you lose a lot of middle ground voters because there's probably a lot of people that would say, yeah, maybe we should figure out what we do with the hardworking people here. But when you take that hardcore position, a lot of people move to the other position. And right now, that's the position that has been voted into office. And if you don't like what the law is, then you got to get enough people in office to change the law. But you know what? There have been several administrations over the last 30 years that had full control of the presidency and Congress that could have done something to reform our system, and they did not do it. Let's go to Ray in Torrance. Ray, hello.
Hi. The government always loves putting the problem on somebody else. So they put the landlords to have to cover for all these people with the mandatory the ban on evictions. They do it across the board. You name it, they always try and figure out someone else to stick it on.
Yeah, and they've used the landlords as a punching bag over and over and over again. It was just a few years ago that these same unions demanded that the residents of LA pass ULA, which is that what they called a mansion tax, which turned out to be a 5% real estate transfer tax on anyone buying and selling apartment buildings, because, of course, apartment buildings are worth more than $5 million, which is greatly made it more difficult to want to buy or own an apartment building and gotten even more mom and pops out of the industry in Los Angeles.
It's absolutely destructive what they do. I mean, everything you look at, they're pushing, property owners out. They're doing so many different things. What it's pushing it towards is corporate owned housing. And once it's corporate owned, you'll never be able to buy it. And that's what they want to do. Then everybody has to rent, and no one owns their houses anymore. And that's the path where it's going. And they're trying to take it all away, whether it's from taxes and always trying to increase taxes. They always go, oh, there's a housing affordability crisis. But yet we have the highest property taxes. We have Title 24, which increases the cost of building. Everything they do here makes everything more expensive. But yet they say, oh, we have an affordability crisis.
And everything that everyone in power in Los Angeles, the county, the state of California, everything they do in the name of affordability has the opposite effect. And we see it over and over again. Thanks so much for the call, Ray. Appreciate it. 800-222-KABC is the phone number. The SEIU and the LA Tennants Union say, in response to the ICE raids, we need another eviction moratorium. Let's go to Michael in San Dimas. Michael, hello.
Hi, how are you?
Doing great.
Okay. I would say no to the moratorium. I think we need to protect the landlords. I would think the government, if they want to protect the people that are scared to go outside and work, that the government needs to pay for their rent. And so then that way, the landlords are able to pay their taxes and don't lose their, stuff. Anyway, but, they have millions to put away to fight Trump. So why don't they use that money to protect the people that they're trying to keep? That's my point.
It's a really good point. There were a lot of promises to make landlords whole with the last eviction moratorium during COVID, and a lot of those promises ran completely empty. Let's go to Bonnie in LA. Bonnie, hello.
Hi. So just two comments. One is on SEIU. They're the same union that does for in-home support services. You are not allowed to work for in-home support services unless you have legal status, whether it's residency or citizenship. So I find that very hypocritical. The other point I wanted to say is that Eunices is out there talking about what an injustice it is to the people that she represents, but it's an injustice that she represents a community that's very vulnerable, and yet she refuses to protect them from all the lawlessness that's out there, everything that's going on in MacArthur Park, all the drugs that are out there, but she won't protect them from that. So I find that very hypocritical as well. Those are my only
That is Eunices. That's Eunices to a T, Bonnie. You couldn't have said it any clearer. Thanks so much for the call. Appreciate it. Let's go to Henry in Hacienda Heights. Henry, hello.
Well, you left me on hold for 25 minutes. I was getting ready to hang up. Anyway, I'm for them not paying them a dime. If I go to their country, I don't get jack iota. There's the streets. The thing is, if ICE really wants to make an impact, how come they don't hit the senior centers like in Hacienda Heights, loaded with all these Asians from out of the country? No paperwork. They milk the system, but they don't pay into it. Same thing with all these senior centers, Pico Rivera, Montebello, El Monte, loaded with illegal immigrants. It's not about anything but the American people.
Well, there you go, Henry. By the way, if you got some tips, you can send them to the U.S. Attorney. You could send them to ICE if you've got places you think they should go. Thanks so much for the call. Appreciate it. If you're on hold, stay on hold. More of your calls coming up next. It's the News Blitz with Randy Wang on Talk Radio 790 KABC. It's the News Blitz with Randy Wang on KABC. Let's go to Stuart in Seal Beach. Stuart, hello.
Hello, Randy. Thank you for bringing this issue up. It's very important. I think it doesn't just affect landlords. It affects all the vendors that provide services and goods to landlords, the Home Depots, the plumber, the local plumber, the local electrician. You know, if you don't have the rents, you can't afford to do those things. It affects the banks. The banks don't want to make loans in a community like this when your rents can be dried up like they were for 58 months. We had tenants for 58 months that didn't get a single dollar of rent increase. That's hard to explain to a bank why they should make a loan. Why should an insurance company who thinks that you can't get rental income sufficient to keep your building in good shape, why should they insure you? This affects a lot of people. Now, the other thing is, who's going to have a place to stay for young college grads? And who's going to have a job for young college grads when they come out in Los Angeles when you have this kind of environment? Nobody is going to invest in this kind of city. And they have really damaged the city in lots of people's eyes around this country. And you look at the job creation factor in Los Angeles, there is no private creation of jobs. We're losing jobs.
Oh, you're totally right about that. And that's why we're seeing the city of Los Angeles now in a structural deficit, because they're the ones doing all the hiring, and they've made it an impossible environment to do business in so many different categories. The latest one being hotels, and now they're going back to the landlords. Thanks so much for the call. Appreciate it. Hey, look at this. 790 KABC welcomes Kenny G at the Bank of America Performing Arts Center on November 12th. Tickets on sale Friday at Ticketmaster.com. But right now, caller number 9 at 1-888-795-2222 gets a pair of tickets to the show. Tickets furnished by Nederlander Concerts. Good luck dialing. If you're on hold, stay on hold. More of your calls coming up next. It's the News Blitz with Randy Wang on Talk Radio 790 KABC. It's the News Blitz with Randy Wang on KABC. Let's go to Bill in La Cañada. Bill, hello.
Federal lawsuit by some apartment and landlords association to stop Hugo and his fellow quasi-literate cholos from operating this criminal shakedown. It's a violation of the 14th Amendment clause on equal protection of the laws, which says the state cannot deny any person equal protection of the laws. You can't single out one group of people to get free services unless you say, okay, all tenants don't have to pay, or all businesses have to offer their stuff for free, meaning stores can't charge people when they come in and grab stuff. This is no different. The Constitution is what it solved this problem, and that's why it's so dangerous letting these people ignore federal immigration law.
There you go, Bill. Thanks so much for the call. Let's go to Dorothy in Winnetka. Dorothy, hello.
Hello. Yes, I'm all for the rates, the ICE raids. We should leave them alone. A lot of the money that is spent housing and feeding these people. And so we, the taxpayers, have to pay for all this. And also, I have a friend that has a house on a property, and because of the new laws, he can't get his tenant to pay rent, and he has to live on that.
Yeah, this is what we see all the time. Thanks so much for the call. Dale, you got 10 seconds. Dale, hello.
Hey, Randy, this will give a new meaning to the word sanctuary city. Do illegal aliens work and pay taxes?
Good question. Thanks so much for the call, Dale. Thank y'all so much for the calls. We'll revisit this issue when we can. It's the News Blitz with Randy Wang on KABC.